Hey, it's so good to be here in Vibe with Gary Brightman, the owner and operator here. Gary's taking his time today to be able to tell us a little about his story, his journey. Gary, tell us a little bit about where you come from. Let's start with the Reader's Digest version. Where are you from? And then we'll get to how you ended up in Hong Kong.
Okay. So basically I'm from London, from North London. I first came to Hong Kong in 1986 on a holiday randomly, and fell in love with Hong Kong.
What did you like about Hong Kong? I mean, I think everybody's got a story about falling in love with Hong Kong who's been here a long time. What?
Okay, yeah. Well, mine, I suppose, living in London and then and eating in Chinese restaurants. All the Chinese restaurants in London were Hong Kong restaurants, and basically landing here right from the start, coming in between the buildings, landing at Kai Tak, coming out of the busy, smelly heat, hits you at Kai Tak. So straight away it was attack on the senses.
Wouldn't you say any newcomers to Hong Kong, they don't get that first impression coming into the new airport the last 20 years? Like when we landed at Kai Tak, and it was that single runway in the middle of the city, like you said, you'd land those 747s right. Can you come in over the building, see the women doing their laundry on the roofs, and that initial smell, the fragrant harbor.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what it did for me. I mean, after a 12-hour flight, you're pretty groggy anyway. The next thing you know, you're looking at people doing their washing up as you're coming in to land. And it does hit you. It is attack on the senses. I think our sense of smell is very acute to our memories, and so coupled with the heat of Hong Kong, I think I landed here in the summer, probably June, July time. So
hot
right
and humid.
Hot and humid. And then actually getting out of the airport and then getting into TST where the hotel was, seeing rickshaws, red rickshaws everywhere.
Right.
1986, they still exist.
Yeah, you don't see that anymore. You don't see that.
No, sadly.
They're all gone. I remember in the 90s here, they would still have them over at the Central Star Ferry Pier for the tourists. And they weren't issuing new licenses, but they would grandfather in the old guys who still had the licenses. And I always felt bad for them because they always looked like they were about 100 years old carrying these people around.
That's right.
So when you came, was it for vacation or did you come for a work purpose, that initial time
so
in
that initial one in 86, I was 25 years old. I came there was 3 sets of couples. We came on holiday, Hong Kong, Bangkok, and somewhere else in Thailand. So that was the holiday, and randomly one of our friends' brother was a Hong Konger, lived in Hong Kong, and so he hosted us around for 5 days. So we went to Tiger Balm Gardens, we went to Ocean Park, we drove up to the peak. It was just the most romantic, fantastic thing we could do, seeing parrots in, Tiger Balm Gardens. Oh my, you just didn't get that in North London.
Not at all. No, not at all. It was very exotic, and coming in '86, obviously the arrangement of giving Hong Kong back to China had recently been inked. Was that factored in? Were people talking about that back then?
Yeah, good question. I must admit, at that age, none of that sort of occurred to me. I didn't see that on the news. I didn't realise that the joint proclamation had been signed, with Thatcher, etc. It didn't really mean anything to me other than I was going on holiday to a British colony, sounds a bit, blasé, but just the fact that it was a little piece of England in Asia.
I remember when I got here too, it was an anomaly. They had all this Britishness, but here you were kind of in a Chinese city, and that's what gave it some of its exoticness. It really was the East and the West and the...
the things that we did, so we would walk up through Mong Kok, through there was a live market there in those days, believe it or not. There was one street we were shopping, I think near the ladies market where that is now, turned a corner, looked down the street, and there's chickens and there's snakes and there's...
Yeah, you don't see that anymore.
Yeah, all running around the whole street. My girlfriend, who was very sort of vegetarian and squeamish about things, ran in the other direction.
Yeah.
We went down there with the video cameras and
That's
filmed
funny.
it.
That's great. That's
and that was like, wow, this is... And eating in Dai Pai dongs and stuff. It's just...
Yeah, very exotic. Very.
Yeah.
I think we a lot of us who come here to Hong Kong, we get that feel, and obviously you, like many of us, came back.
Yeah.
And how did that occur?
So interesting, really, because I came here, and once I'd been here and gone back to the UK, I thought I want to live there one day, and it was a target. Then, literally 4 years later, my brother said. He had a good mate whose father was a pilot for Dragon Airlines, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to go and live in Hong Kong." So he stole my thunder a bit. I thought, "How dare you? You can't live in my dream.
You can't
You've never
take my
been there.
idea."
Yeah, you haven't even been there, and you're going to go and live there.
Yeah.
So having got over the jealousy bit of it, he moved here in 1991, I think.
Okay.
Then spent the next 20 years here. He ran the China Tea Club in Pedder Street, I worked in IT, information technology, in the City of London, and would come out here on work trips. So setting up IT for various financial companies. And so I could often engineer a business trip to Hong Kong, see my brother and his family. And so for the next 20 years, I pretty much came here at least once a year for the next 20 years.
Okay. But you didn't actually live here. You just came on regular visits.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would do everything I could to do my 1 year in Hong Kong, once a year trip to Hong Kong.
So how did you finally make the jump that brought you here in a full-time capacity?
Yeah, it's interesting actually. It was a leap of faith actually.
So you never got, and I got to ask, you never got tired. All those trips to Hong Kong, you still wanted to live here. You didn't think, oh, okay, I've been to Hong Kong. I need to go try somewhere else now.
It was amazing, really. Once it had bitten me, I really wanted to live here. And every year I came here, sometimes for 3 days for my brother's wedding, sometimes for 2 weeks for a nice longer holiday. I found it harder and harder to fly back to the UK and felt sadder and sadder going back to London. And I had a great life in London. So
London's a great city.
It's a great city.
Love
what's
London.
not to love there?
Yeah.
So
those are my two favorite cities, are London and Hong Kong.
I would say so. I would agree. I would definitely agree with you there.
So Gary, how did it evolve from regular trips out to Hong Kong to making the big leap of faith and moving out here permanently?
Yeah, so interesting. Basically, for about 10 years, I was applying for IT jobs out in Hong Kong from London, and just getting nowhere, just falling on rocky ground. I was registered with all the big agencies. Nobody was picking me up, and I thought actually, from their point of view, they'd probably have to pay an expat package to get me over here. Right. How do they know whether I would fit in and all the rest of it? So. Basically, my wife in 2008 said to me, let's just pack our bags and go. Why don't we do that? And that was a real epiphany, really, because I didn't think of that. We can't go unless we can be there financially.
Right. And it's not a cheap city to live in.
No.
You can't just go to, it's not like going to Thailand and think, oh, we can keep the cost of living down. Coming to Hong Kong, if you don't have an expat package or something safe to land to, it's a leap of faith.
It is, and it was a big leap of faith. But given that my wife was on board with it, and actually then I had another thing, which was the company I worked for, a Dutch bank called Rabobank. They were wanting to centralise their staff back into Holland, and so they said to me, either you move to Holland or we're going to have to make you redundant. I thought seriously, then in my mind I was choosing between Hong Kong or Holland. No contest. No contest. I'd worked in Holland for 5 years, beautiful country, lovely people, but it didn't have the lure that Asia had for me, and this is the gateway of Asia.
Right.
So basically I could engineer a 1 year wind down from Rabobank, get paid off several years' salary, and move over here.
And it speaks a lot too that your wife was not only on board but was a catalyst for it, because it's a big jump, and for both of you to be on the same page, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we're lucky. We're big mates. We're best mates, me and my wife. We don't have kids, but which makes us very we can just get up and do whatever we want to do within reason.
So how did you end up making your bread and butter when you finally made that leap of faith?
Yeah, so what we had is a bit of money behind us. We had a UK London house which we'd rented out, so no going back for 6 months.
Yeah.
We had a bit of money behind us and we moved here, and my brother lived in Moi Wo in a little village here called Luk Tay Tong. And above where he lived there was a spare flat, believe it or not.
Wow.
Chances.
Fortuitous.
Yeah, very fortuitous. So we literally said, okay, we'll come and we'll move over there. We'll live there for 6 months. We'll travel Asia, which we did. We travelled China, we travelled Australia, we travelled, Cambodia, Vietnam, etc. And just use that as a base whilst getting used to Hong Kong living. But at the same time, we started applying for work here. Both of us are IT professionals. My wife actually got work quite quickly in JP Morgan. I got a job at Nomura.
Great. So I know that you ventured into filmmaking, or did you start filmmaking then, or had you always been involved in filmmaking? I'd like to ask a little bit about that as an amateur filmmaker myself. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I suppose my father was a cinematographer, not by profession, and photographer again, not by profession, but more
as a hobby.
As a hobby, but quite a strong one. He was a member of the Associate of the Royal Photographic Society and stuff like that. So he's a very high level. He had his own dark room and stuff, and so we grew up with cameras, and we were used to that. I always had a camera, so from the earliest, rubbishy little Kodak things to what I have today. So, and I used to go on holiday all over the world with friends. They would always have video cameras. I didn't have the means for video cameras, but they did. So the days where the video cameras fitted on your shoulder with great big VHS tapes, I would always be the video man. Right. So it was a medium that I loved, but I never had the skill set to edit or do anything else. Coupled with a love of the English language, I suppose I got to a juncture where after 35 years in IT, I was starting to get sick of it, basically. Right. But it was great money, so it's hard to stop. You just chop and lose that money. I
think many of us have come to, and pilgrims listening to this, we're always trying to find that tipping point between going with your creative heart and what can pay the bills.
Yeah, that's it. Because you're not going to make money. And it is, I think, the right attitude to go into it, or certainly for me, was to think that I'm not going to make money out of the filmmaking business. I'm going to be doing it for pleasure and for self-satisfaction, and to follow a process. So what happened is I was at Nomura for 3 years and managed to get another redundancy. Basically, they centralised back into Tokyo, made me redundant, gave me a year's salary. And it was my wife actually that said to me, again, she wanted to stay within IT. She's happy there. She's still doing that today. And maybe that's the thing that gives me the confidence in the angle for doing it, is that she still brings the bread home, if things go pear-shaped. But
you got the safety net.
I got the safety net there. So I had a safety net. We had a little bit of money. I said I wanted to go to film school. The reason I decided to go to film school actually is that I started going to some script writing, screenwriting meetups around Hong Kong. I started writing comedy scripts because I love British comedy. I grew up with it and I wanted to write comedy. So I wrote a couple of comedy scripts and I took them to these script making things, and we would read them and I honed them into 25-minute episodes. And a guy picked me up, worked for a company called Dragon Horse Films, and said, I'd like to commission you to write a film for me, a family-orientated film set in Hong Kong / China. And that he did. He basically, under contract, I was then expected to produce a script.
Wow.
Yeah.
Bingo,
yeah.
That doesn't happen all the time.
It doesn't happen off the time, and it was just random that it happened. It was kind of right time, right place. The money was, $5,000 US, so nothing.
Yeah.
However, I started to write this script, but then, and I was self-taught in screenwriting, and I felt that I needed to know the whole process. I'm quite a logical person, having spent 35 years in IT. I'm a creative person before that, but then forced into a logical box. So I needed a kind of a process and a framework to write this script in. So that gave me the idea of film school. So there was a 1-year diploma.
Where did you go to film school at?
Okay, so in Wanchai, there was a place called the International Academy
I'm
of
familiar
Film
with
and
it.
Television. Yeah,
Okay.
right opposite the Southern Stadium there.
You can do that in
And-
English there?
Yeah, did it in English.
Okay.
Yeah, 1-year diploma. At the age of 54, the other students on the course were 18 years old, so I was actually 3 times their age.
But you're bringing the experience.
Yeah, exactly. So I always ended up being the director type of thing, you know,
Right.
and they always needed to have some sort of structure and help.
Right.
We worked well as a team together,
Oh, a lot of fun.
and I qualified, and absolutely loved it. I made a thesis film. It was during the 2014 umbrella movement. So I filmed that and I love music, so I coupled my love of music, a girl band called GDJYB. They were supporters of the umbrella movement, but they were also about to appear at Clockenflap on the main stage.
Okay.
So that became my thesis film. So I made that.
For pilgrims out there, Clockenflap is the annual music festival. It's our own little Glastonbury here.
It is, yeah, absolutely, yeah, and it's got bigger and bigger each year, hasn't it?
And I've gone
Yeah.
for 10 years in a row until last year when it got canceled.
Yes,
And I was
yeah.
devastated. So
Yeah.
I'm knocking on wood that this year we're all going.
We get it.
Yeah.
Me too. Absolutely. Support those guys. Great festival.
Totally, totally.
Yeah. So that was the background for my thesis film. So I did that, and also whilst at film school, I realised that I had more of a passion for documentary. I like telling real stories with real people, interviewing, and then building up a story. And yeah, writing a documentary is totally different to writing a film.
Sure.
And so I already had written a film and written a script and written a few sort of mini films. But I like the process of a documentary, which is a little bit more fluid. It's a little bit more, you have a 3-act structure, you have some goals that you want to achieve, but a lot of what you end up doing and the story you're telling comes from the mouths of others. And so I kind of like that, and I love the history of Hong Kong. So for my documentaries, I was always keen to make them on, you know, things that were dying out in Hong Kong.
It's one of my, having been here a long time myself and working with young people,
Yeah.
sometimes I'm a little disappointed that the history of Hong Kong is not known by the Hong Kong people often.
Yes, yeah.
And it is such
yeah.
a fascinating history, and,
Yeah.
and there's many stories to be told.
Yeah, there is, and you're right. I think it's almost down to external people telling those stories for the locals. It's rare that you find locals saying, "Look, here's how cinema grew up here in Hong Kong. Here's how what we do with juju sticks, or here's how Dai Pai Dongs operate." And those stories are often better told from outsiders, aren't they? Yeah.
So, what is there a documentary that has been your capstone, or your where's this culminated with?
Yeah. So I suppose. There was 2 documentaries I did, and these are sort of 15-minute documentaries. There's a lot of effort goes into a 15-minute documentary.
I've done some student films, and I'm amazed by the amount of effort and time that goes into filmmaking.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, you shoot probably 10 or 15 times as much footage as you need, and a lot of it is down to the editing room, but you're sort of nervous that you don't get enough in filming. So you tend to over-film, so that you've got these B-rolls and these things to cut away to and stuff. So, yeah, so that's hence me being I'd left film school, qualified. I set up a production company called Man Bright Films, and was all set to make little documentaries, self-funded, and so I made a couple. I made the one on the girl band, GDJYB Eats Music. I had my own channel, which was then YouTube, but now since then I've gone on to Vimeo, so my content is available on Vimeo. I'm also on IMDb, actually, so if you look up Gary Brightman on IMDb.
I'll put those links in the landing page of this episode of Beyond the Pale, and that way, pilgrims, if you want to go to Vimeo, you want to check up on Gary on IMDb. Those links will be available.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and so my real name Gary Brown, and there's thousands, millions of Gary Browns out there. So I've chosen my mum's maiden name, which is Brightman.
Your professional
Professional name. My
That's right.
professional creative name is Brightman. But the good thing about that is, if you search Gary Brightman, there are only about 3 or 4 in the world.
Wow.
Yeah. So you will find me.
Hence
Yeah.
the name change.
Yeah. Exactly. So you will find.
So Gary, just moving on though, we are in this wonderful shop that for the last couple years I've been part of, and it's probably what's led to this podcast happening, is often we're sitting in a used bookstore, vinyl and DVD shop. And you are the proprietor. How did that come about? Because this is not the kind of shop you see much of any. You don't see this kind of shop much anymore, and yet everyone pines for this kind of shop.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you'd asked me, the 17-year-old me, what do you want to do when you grow up, I would have said, run a book and a vinyl shop, because that was the cool thing to do. It's where you spent most of your time in the 70s, you know. So I always had that love of, you know, vinyl and books. But again, it was a kind of right place, right time thing for me. I was 3 or 4 years into filmmaking. I'd also made a sci-fi series, a 6-episode series, and I found myself, you know, living here in Moy Woe, been here for 10 years, and I gravitated to the bookshop when I moved here, like most people would. It previously run by another British guy, but an antiquarian bookshop in those days. And I don't know, 2.5 years ago, the guy said to me, "You know, I'm leaving. I'm gonna pack up. I'm gonna go and open a bookshop in France."
Oh.
Randomly,
As one does.
As one does, yeah. He had a Hong Kong wife, but he was an ex-Hong Kong professor.
Was he French?
But he was a British guy, and he was going to open a British bookshop in France, in an area which is one of those areas which is an enclave of British people, you know, with the British mayor and all that sort of thing. So anyway, I went home, told my wife, supportive as ever. She said to me, "You want to go for that bookshop? You want to own that bookshop?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm doing film career. This is going to divert me." She said, "Well, you can still do that. You know, you can edit here. You've got a studio here. You know, you could just you can do all your editing on the desktop in the shop, and you can follow your passion." And she loves books and music as well, so she was kind of keen from that angle. So anyway, I then started discussions for a few months with this guy. What will it take? How will we make this work? Eventually, I agreed to buy half of his stock. He would take the other half down to France, open his bookshop there.
Okay.
By taking half of the shop with him, that left me with half a shop. And then I thought, music is my first love, as the song goes. So I thought, okay, vinyl. I'm gonna sell vinyl and CDs and music, and I'm gonna make it. I always wanted to make it a social place, but on my terms. I didn't want it to be on everybody else's terms. So yeah, that's what happened. Basically, we got to an agreement. We had to convince the landlord to let me take on the shop. And we did that 2 years ago. This week is my anniversary.
That's fantastic. Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Because this place has been a special place for many of us. You know, it's interesting. I was just watching, because of the COVID lockdown in the UK and around the world, the National Theatre is showing different productions. They're making a different one available every week. And the one this week was the Barbershop Chronicles, about immigrant culture in the UK and how it forms around the barbershop. And as I was watching some of it, I was realizing, in a small way, that's kind of what this has become
we have
for
here.
A minority group here in Hong Kong.
Yeah,
you know?
It was quite fortuitous. I mean, again, you know, living here, bumped into somebody that really was keen to sort of come here and use it as a social place as well. It's hard to do something on your own often, isn't it?
Sure.
You know, I didn't have the sort of. I was always worried that I wouldn't get the right sort of people to come here and socialise. There had to be my people on my terms.
Right.
But how do you do that? You know, you can't advertise for that sort of things.
No,
and you know, things just fell into place. You know, with I think like-minded people gravitate together,
to
don't
one another.
they?
I can say from the many people I've met here over the many Saturdays I've hung out here, they've always been such a great
Yeah.
very eclectic group. I love coming and perusing the books, and
Yeah.
even yesterday I was watching Krzysztof Kieslowski, Three Colors, and I bought that here.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
so-
Great trilogy, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love this place, and I have to pinch myself sometimes to think. I go home at night and I say, Steph, do you realise I run a bookshop and a music shop? You know, I don't always kind of register it. I take it for granted to a certain extent, but Saturdays are always sacred here.
Yeah.
As you say, we have our club together. But in the weekdays, you know, I'm OCD, so I love to file things and get them in the right place. And when people have done reviews and come to this shop, they've often said it's a well-ordered shop. You know what to find, where to find it, and that's because I'm very A to Z,
Right.
surname, da da da. You know, I'm the perfect person to run a bookshop from that perspective.
That's fantastic.
yeah.
You know, we're just wrapping this up a little bit, Gary. Everything about Beyond the Pale is seeing life and faith through the lens of pilgrimage. And sometimes our discussions meander into the areas of faith. During this wonderful journey that you've shared, is there any, are you a person of faith? Is there any faith aspect you bring to your journey? Or is that something that you give a pass to?
No, it's not really. I wasn't really brought up religious. My family weren't religious. However, I went to weddings, funerals, and christenings in churches. I always loved churches. For me, you know, if that's the house of God, it's a damn good house. You know, churches and cathedrals across the UK and France are particularly fantastic, and I love visiting them. So that's me as an outsider on Christianity. I think I went to Christian schools and basically, but wasn't a faith follower as such. But I've lived my life by probably Christian values anyway. You know, I treat people with respect, no matter of creed and colour. There is one little sort of story when I was a teenager, early teen, 12, 13. I was once caught stealing apples and plums and things.
Oh, you
in
nasty
an orchard.
guy! You're stealing apples.
Yeah.
Throw the book at you.
It was a classic, caught up a tree red-handed. But things escalated, you know. So a guy who was a reverend found me doing this. He called the police. The police came, and the police then went to my parents' house and said, this guy was stealing apples. You know, what are you going to do? Da da da. Actually, my parents were quite supportive. They didn't tell me off or anything like that. They were quite cool with it, more than I thought. But it kind of wound up somehow that a deal was struck where, with the police and this reverend, that I would go to a Sunday school thing called Crusaders.
Right.
At the age of 12 or 13. And then for the next 3 years, I found myself going to a Sunday school.
I just picturing you in that kind of environment is a little different for me.
Totally.
Picture, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was the 70s. It was the punk era. It was different times really in the UK. But the bits that, you know, if people ask me, my friends, I'd say, yeah, I go to a Sunday school, but you know, I'm a swimmer, a diver, and a footballer, and a runner, and I did all those things at a very high level and was very successful at them.
Yeah.
So they were the things I took away from it. However, we would read every Sunday passages from the Bible. We had a Bible each. I've probably still got mine somewhere. Yeah.
So have to check it out again.
I should check it out.
There we go.
Yeah. So. Yeah, Christianity's been around in my life, I suppose. And,
we have interesting discussions around religion, even in the shop sometimes on Saturdays.
Yes.
Because we have an eclectic group there. But anyhow, just wrapping it up, Gary, thank you so much for giving us your time. You know, on the this whole podcast is inspired by the Camino de Santiago, which I walked. And so at the end of every podcast, I like to wish our guest a buen camino, a good journey. So
thank you.
Buen camino, my friend.
Yes.
Thank you for this time together.
Yeah, thank you too. Yeah. Well, I'm having a great journey through life. So
wonderful.
No complaints.
Cheers.